If this is going to go wrong, I'm going to blame it on the table, because that's why I had to run out again. It's very difficult with a mouse, like the table goes downward. So we'll see how this works, okay? I want to build this. So that's my apartment. We're going to build that from scratch. I mean, I've automated some steps because it's a lot of work to place every object, but in general, I'm going to do this from scratch. The plane model is already going to be prepared. That's going to be our player. So we're going to be flying through the living room with a toy plane. Okay? But that step I'm skipping for the sake of time. I'll just focus on the visual part. Before I go there, though, so that's my name. But I'm in Holland, so usually it's really difficult to explain my name. Here it's probably slightly easier, so that's nice. I work for Epic Games. I've been working with Unreal for 17 years now, so that's adding up. I did Unreal Engine 1, 2, 3, now 4, so that's that. I started in 2003 in the industry. I worked for Jong Games here in Holland on Spellborn. Was Unreal Engine 2 even. I worked for Guerrilla Games here as well, and I did some random other jobs. And then eventually I left and I went to Sweden because I got bored in Holland and Belgium. I'm part Dutch, part Belgian. And there was nothing left to do here, I figured, that I wanted to do. So I went to Sweden, I worked for Starbreeze for a while, and then eventually I left that position and I started my own indie company. We made The Ball, Unmechanical, and then the Solus project, of course, all Unreal Engine. And the Solus project got released about 3 months ago in June and July on PC and Xbox. Did quite well. If I have some time left at the end, I'll show you a bit of that in the editor. Okay, but we'll see how long this takes. How many of you are using Unreal on a monthly or weekly basis, like regularly? So it's pretty hard with the lights, but that's like 10%, I guess, 15, 20? So how many of you are using Unity on a weekly or daily basis? Yeah. Shame on you.
You have a challenge here, Sjoerd.
Yeah, the fun part is that Unity comes after me, like that's the next talk, I believe, I'm right. And they're going to do realistic rendering as well, or something with post-process or effects or something in the same style, which I didn't know and they didn't know my talk. So we both picked the same subject, so you can see the same subject twice in both engines.
Yeah,
okay?
It's like a presidential debate, and we get to vote at lunchtime. Yeah.
So no pressure, so let's just build stuff, okay? I'm very technical in my background, so I don't tend to do much, I don't have many slides. My slides, in fact, are PDFs, right? I'll just build it in Engine. So what I want to do is I want to do the art pipeline. I want to do materials, basic materials. I want to do world building, lighting, and foliage. We're going to do this with free Unreal Engine 4 assets that you can download as well at home. And we're going to go through the material editor, level design, foliage, lighting, as mentioned, right? So let's start. Let's start Unreal. So we have templates. I'm not sure, actually, before I go there, who was here last year in the same presentation that I did last year? No one? One, two, a few? Cool. So that's interesting. Every year I'm in Holland, while this is loading, by the way, so I'm just talking to fill the time. While I'm in Holland, every year it seems like a completely new group of people. It's really interesting. That makes it easy for me as well. You haven't heard what I said yet. Okay, so the template system, we have it in Blueprint and C++. Blueprint is a visual scripting language. I'm going to skip that today, but I will show you a little bit of it very quickly. And the template system allows you to basically, it's a press the button and you have a game. It's very good if you want to try things. It's very good if you want to just learn the engine, because you can, for example, generate a rolling ball game for some reason, and then look at how it's generated, learn from that in either C++ or Blueprint. It's very good for prototyping as well. Because you can generate a project and then focus your time on actually trying the thing you want to try, right? Instead of setting up the basics of the game first. So I'm going to start a new project now with a template. I'm going to go with a blank template, so blank, because I'm going to do it. I'll import some functionality later on myself, and we'll call this control, and we'll call it control again. It has starter content. It's meant for desktop and console. You can change that here. And it has maximum quality set. You can change all of this later on as well. You can also convert it from a Blueprint to C++ project. I mean, these are just presets to start, and we create a project. Now, as that is loading, I'm going to use example content. So we released about 20, 30 or so pieces of example content. For example, this thing which we released 2 years ago, a year and a half ago about, at GDC. That thing is released. Basically, any piece of marketing content or example content that we make ourselves, we will release to the community. You can download it, you can see how we made it, and you can use any of the stuff that we made in your own games. So if you want to take, for example, the boy and the kite demo that's pictured here, and you want to make your own game with that and put it on Steam, you want to rip our stuff and release it as is and ask money for it, that's technically okay. Morally, maybe less so, okay? But you can use whatever you want in your projects. And I'm going to use content that's from our realistic rendering example. It's mostly the same content that I'm using. I changed a few colors and details, but you can get that yourself as well if you just go through our launcher. Right, so that's loading. I'm going to bring in some of that content from that project as mentioned, right? So this is some of the content I prepared for this, and that's going to go to the project I just made. So that's there, there, and there. So this is the project folder I'm copying it to. Unlike Unity, we don't have meta files or anything else that can break. So it's very straightforward and very simple. It's just one file per asset, okay? I'll open something up here. See, everything is a U asset file, that's it. That's just it. You can make that read-only as well. There's no problem with doing that. There's, all the references are embedded within the U asset file, including the source content and everything else. Okay, good. So, this is my default scene. I'm showing the folders here. You can see this is the folders I just imported. And as part of that is my player. So this is the blueprint. I'll just show you the basics so you can get the game up and running. Here's my blueprint system. It's visual scripting. I already prepared this, as you can see. And what this is, it's a toy plane with a camera behind it. And you can steer the toy plane left and right using the mouse. That's it. So I'm going to quickly hook that up so we can start building the world. I'll do world settings, for example, and I'll do it says game mode override. I'm going to say, please use my game mode. The game mode controls basically which kind of player is active. All right, so we simply did this, and then let's lower the volume for a second. So here's my beautiful game. Okay, I turned off that so you can't die at the moment if you crash into something. Otherwise, it got kind of difficult to work with. But it's just a plane, you turn the mouse, and it works. This is pure visual script, no programming. I can do this in like half an hour or 15 minutes if I start from scratch. Okay, so we're going to build a living room we can fly through with our little wooden toy plane. I'm going to do this from a completely new level. So I'll do new level, completely empty, just a black space. And I'm going to import things. So I'll do a new folder here in the content. Control. And I'm going to start off by importing a few basic assets, just to show the workflow of that. It's not very fancy. It's going to be very simple models, but I'll just show you the idea. So I have content to import here. I got 2 meshes, and eventually I got 1 texture. I'll start with the meshes. So this is the floor and the wall of the apartment. So here you get the import options for the model importing. I'm going to turn off auto-generate collision. It actually does too much, so I usually like it manually. I'm old school. So no auto-generate collision. I don't want light maps, UVs generated, and I don't want materials imported, and I don't want textures imported. That should be it. So we'll import that. We got this. The files we're importing are standard FBX files. So you can just export this from Max, Maya, Modo, Blender, whatever exports FBX, which is most stuff. We'll do it. And what we then get is this. So you can see this is the room. This will be the walls of the room. And I need to do 2 or 3 things here. I need to do the collision first of all. So as you import a model, there is no collision defined. It says here, enable collision is off. So I'm going to enable collision. And then I need to specify the simplified collision of this. Right? So I'm going to go to collision. And here you get a lot of presets. For example, I can do bounding box collision. And that adds this thing. It's just a box, basically. You can duplicate this, you can add more of them. You can do other shapes as well, but it might be hard to see on the screen. But most of this is not really that useful for my apartment. It's probably hard to see. So I'm going to remove all this collision. You can make this collision in Max or Maya or so as well, by the way, and import it. Or you can have Unreal generated, try to approximate the shape, but that won't work well for the apartment either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to collision complexity, use complex collision. It's simple. So every polygon is collision. The thing is 100% accurate collision. So that's set. Then we need light map UVs because we're going to be baking the light during this presentation. I can display the UVs here. This is UV channel 0, so it's displaying the diffuse UVs, which doesn't really work. As you can see, it looks really weird. It's not really meant to display that. But if I set it to the light map UV channels, already been prepared in Max or Maya, but Unreal can generate these as well internally. We see the UV layout for the light map, and then I'm going to say light map resolution. Default resolution is 1024. That's it. Mesh done. Next one, very quickly, the same thing again. So I'll enable collision. I'll set collision complexity to complex default. Light map resolution 1024. That's done. Okay. Next, I'm going to import a texture. So this is going to be a very simple material, but I want to make a basic material with one simple texture. I have a normal map of a painted wall. So this is going to be the normal map for the wall itself. You can see it's just like stucco or whatever, like a stone wall, and that's it. So I'll take that and I'll create a new material. So we open that up, and then I'll drag the texture in there. So we have that. I can do it very, very basic. Actually, let me leave the normal map alone for a second. Let's make the most basic thing you can do. Just add a color, constant 3 vector, connected to base color. And let's say it's, for example, red, right? Now I just have a red ball. That's kind of easy. Then let's connect a constant 1 vector to roughness 0. It's all PBR. So it's, if I do roughness 0, for example, it's completely reflective, real-time reflections. It displays the sky as a default setup, but if I place this in the level, I will get the accurate reflections. I can do a lot of other stuff with this, but I'm keeping this simple. We're just going to hook up the normal to the normal input here. So as you can see, this is normal mapped. I mean, I can do this, I can just add something that doesn't make sense. I can move it, pan it. But that's probably a kind of strange wall, but yeah. It's all very simple to get anything going with the system. We did that. The texture is actually too big. The scale is too big or too small, depending on how you look at it. So I'm going to add a texture coordinate left of it, which is going to scale the texture size. And here it says U tiling, I'm going to do 0.5, V tiling 0.5, and now the scale is simply bigger. And I'm going to set roughness to 0.6, which seems to work quite well for a stone wall. So now I have this. It's a very simple material, but it shows you at least a little bit of the basics of this system. We'll save that. I'll select it. Actually, sorry, it shouldn't be red. That's not going to work, so I'm going to set it to slightly yellowish white. Something like that. And then we're going to apply this to the wall we just made. So here it says default material. That's that. As you can see, it's now applied. Subtle, but still. For the floor, we're going to use an existing material to save time. So this is one that's already prepared. It's called floor something. Wood floor material instance. You get this. You can see this is an instance, actually. And an instance is, I guess it's similar to Unity, where you write a shader and then you make a material, but the material only exposes a certain number of the properties that you set to be exposed in the material, right? So the instance has a simplified user interface, but it comes from the material underneath, which is this. So, I mean, the point being, this is too much for me to explain at the time I have, but the point is that we have a very large system underneath all of this. This is not just, oh yeah, you can place blocks and draw lines, because there's a lot of tools and editors out there where you can draw lines, okay? In fact, MS Paint can draw lines. But what we made has to work for AAA productions, has to work for 300-400 people teams. So we have a lot of tools built in. This is just one of them that continue on that and that let you go, do a lot more with the tools we have than to just do the obvious, the stuff that I'm doing right now, to speed up the workflow. Anyway, let's save that. Let's save that, and let's save that. Let's build a room. You can just drag the meshes in. I am going to set the meshes to scale 4. So I'm going to scale them up because I have this toy plane. The toy plane needs a bit more space to fly around, so I just use a bigger space. I'm going to set it to location 0, 0, 0, so it's in the middle of the world. And then we have our basic room. Let's carry on. We need doors and other stuff. Let's see, we have a couch and another couch, and we have sliding doors. I'm just adding the most essential things. I'm going to add some of these things by hand so you can see the workflow, and then I'm going to start speeding up the process by just importing and copy-pasting things. So we need curtains and we need a door, and I think that's about it. All of these are too small, as you can see, so I'm going to do scale 4 on all of them. And just going to place this stuff for a second. And again, because we've been doing this for so long and because we start as a level editor, we have a lot of tools built in that make life easier. For example, I'm not using these things. As you can see with my mouse, I'm just moving it without. There's a lot of shortcuts you can do that with. You can attach the camera even to your movement, so it all goes a little bit faster. Let's see. If you press spacebar, you cycle between rotation, scale, and yeah, that's it. Sorry. It's roughly like this. I'm going to have to tweak this later, but roughly in these places. And this is in front of the window, roughly there. Okay, and I moved that accidentally. I think there. You can duplicate things in lots of different ways. Just alt dragging, for example, is duplicate. It seems pretty okay. It's a bit too high up. Yeah, interior design. I need 3 doors, and then we're done with this step. Then I'm going to have to do the balcony after this step, and the sky. The sky is going to be very simple. We still have to take care of it, though. There's a bit of a hole next to it. That. And one more door. Okay. Actually, I need a black box. This will be very hard to see on the projector, but I have a big, I'll show it in wireframe. It's a big box, and it fits the room. There we are. It's just going to block the light coming in from outside, so just for that sake. But as everything is black, it's kind of hard to see. Then the balcony. So we got a mesh here, that's the balcony floor. Again, size 4. So that's the floor of the balcony, it's just a big cube. So we put it somewhere there. And then we'll duplicate it upwards. And actually, I'm going to say the light maps here should be overwritten to 512. Same for that, because we're going to need that later on. So override light map resolution, 512. Let's duplicate this again. Because these are the walls of my apartment, or the balcony, left and right, somewhere there, somewhere there. So now we have a very good balcony. It's very beautiful. I need the balcony railing so you don't fall off, because you probably don't want to live there then. So here's the railing, mesh, again scale 4. So we did that. It has this little thing at the bottom, connection plate, whatever. So I'm going to turn it 180 degrees, move it down, connect it to the stone on the left. It's kind of hard to see because it's flat white. Something like that. And this is a modular mesh, so it's built on the grid. So in Unreal, you have a grid system built in by default. So the way we handle this, if I drag this, for example, I can snap it, see? It snaps to the previous one. I can quickly build it. So over here, you have the grid settings. You can define your own grid as well. Everything is gridified, whatever. Because again, we're coming from a level design background, so we have a lot of tools built in to make this go fast. So we got this. Yeah, good enough. One thing remaining, the sky. I have a background mesh somewhere. It's called background, I think. There we are. It's just a photo of a city. So just move that out. It has to be a lot bigger. I'm not sure how big, but big. Like something like that or so. Then we have to move it, which will take time. See if we can speed up a bit. It's a little bit big. You can place camera bookmarks as well, which actually might be good in this case. So if I just do Control 1, I remember this position. If I press 1 again, I go here. So it's a bit easy to just immediately go back to where I came from. I'm going to try to position it as a perspective seems to match roughly-ish, which I think is about there, judging by the top of the roofs. Make sure we can't see the left and the right of it either, so that seems good. And then we need the sky. Not many people notice that use Unreal, but if you do view options on the bottom, you have more things you can show. So I can show the engine content, which gives me another folder here. This is actually the stuff the engine uses itself, so the icons, for example, of the interface. But in between all of that more useless stuff, there are some standard assets as well, such as the sky. So I can drag in a sky sphere. So I have that, just a sphere with a sky. In fact, I can probably change the material on it. Let's try this. Or let's see. I'm trying to find one that works well. Not that. See if we can find the best one for this. Nah, it's too fancy. Yeah, I'm going to try one more time, otherwise I'm wasting time. I'll just go with standard whitish, okay? I'm going to place it in the middle of the world again. It's a little bit small maybe, so let's make it scale 500. So it's a little bit bigger, like a lot bigger. And what we have now is this, right? So we're getting there. I now done all the most essential stuff, but it would take me too much time to place the remaining 300 objects. So one way of speeding this up would be by using content you've saved earlier. And I'm going to do that by copy-pasting it in. Everything in Unreal is text. If I copy something to Notepad, I get this. So I've copied this before to Notepad. I'll just do Ctrl-A, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and I got stuff. So that went easy. Then let's readjust this a little bit. And maybe in the back a bit more. Okay, and then that's still not good enough because I'm still missing stuff. So next step, let's do this again differently. I'm going to go to Windows, Levels. I'm going to do add an existing level, and I've prepared this level earlier. And in that level, it's a separate level file, and it's a black space basically with just the details, the models floating around. But I can merge that level into mine, and now I suddenly have the rest of the detail. Okay, and you can see it's actually still two different layers. I can hide the layers. So it's almost like a layer system saved in separate level files. You can use this either to stream in content while you play. So for example, this is what we did in Gears of War. This is how we started the system in 2004 or 5 or whatever. For example, your one room is one level, the next room is the next level. As you're in room 1, it starts loading room 2 without loading screen. As you walk into room 2, it unloads room 1, right? So you have this continuous loading where it takes just part by part by part. That's done like with this system, but you can also use it for level organization. You could, for example, say, this is my light layer, this is my sound layer, this is the layer of John. I don't know, do it per person and organize it like that because the engine will stream it into each other real time. I mean, not real time, but once the level loads. And I'm gonna have to say, change streaming method, always loaded, and there we are. So, that went quite fast. Let's see what more cool stuff we can do. We probably need Lego. For some reason, I think we really need Lego, okay? And sorry, I have to go quickly back to the level one. I have to make sure this is the active level. You double-click the level you want to be the active level. So just double-click this. And then I'm going to go to foliage. So I'm going to abuse the foliage system to paint Lego, because why not? And I have a couple of Lego blocks here. And there are these. I mean, it's really, really low poly, really simple. It's just a cube and a normal map. They're all blue, but once I'm going to start painting these, they're going to be alternating between red, yellow, and blue. And they're going to do that by using the per instance random value generated by the foliage system for each mesh instance. Okay, so that's why the colors are going to differ. So I'm going to take these four different meshes, drag that in there, so select all of that, set the painting range a little bit smaller, and we get Lego. Hooray! I mean, they're intersecting here and there. Some of them are going to be, stuck in between each other, but I'm not going to be able to fix that at the moment, so I'll just go with what I have. Lego on the table. The kit that lives here is just terrible. Lego in the plant pot, if I can, or it doesn't have collision. I can't do that then.
This is evil.
What?
Stepping on Lego, it's really
I know, so
painful.
let's put Lego outside. Let's put Lego in the couch. Let's hide Lego in the closet or so. I mean, you can put Lego on the lamp if it has collision. I'm not sure if it has collision. If it doesn't have collision, I can't do it. Maybe behind here. Some reason he threw it on the closet. Yeah. Anyway, Lego. Or right behind the door. So when you open the door, you step on Lego. Okay.
It's a level design, apparently, again.
Yeah. Good. Let's save this for a second. Okay, and actually I had slides somewhere. So we did that, we did this, and we mostly did this except for overriding materials. And then we're going to move on to foliage. We did that. I don't like slides, as you can see. I just want to build stuff. And then I have to place actors, right. So the one thing I didn't do was overriding the materials. So for example, if you want to take the balcony floor and you don't want it to be white, you can set it to, I think it's called tiles something, tiles matte or so. You have orange tiles now, right? It's very simple to just override materials. You can just drag something to this one or type something else here. Hooray. Okay, before we do lighting and all the rendering, there's a couple of things that are quite essential for this to work. One of them, let's start very simple, is a player start. That's where the player enters the world. So that's the default start location. So let's just make sure we got that right. In the editor, it's going to work anyway, but in game it wouldn't work, so we need to make sure this exists. And then we need a couple of volumes. The most important one, and the one I'm going to focus on, is a light mass importance volume. That's the preparation for our light system later on. Basically, this tells the engine, within this box, within this volume, you need to have higher detail lighting. So what you normally do is you place this box around the playable area. So the playable area has higher quality lighting than the remaining parts of the level, like distance geometry. And I don't like typing numbers, so I'll just drag this stuff out. Let's see if I can easily select this. So you make sure that it covers roughly the size of the level. It doesn't have to be super accurate. If you make it too big, it will slow down the compile times, but only the compile times, so that's not the worst thing in the world. And the compile times, the rebuild times, the baking of the light is going to be super fast anyway. I know that Unity has some issues with that, so I'm going to very nicely rebuild my light later and do this in under 1 minute on a laptop. Okay. So we need to have a box. As you can see, it just roughly covers the area you can get to. That's good enough. I'll leave that be. Let's see what other, just to make sure I can skip it, maybe a few things. Checkpoints I'm skipping because that's part of a wider presentation. Post-process we'll do in a second. And character indirect detail volume I'll skip as well for the sake of time. So I'll focus on reflection actors and post-processing. So in visual effects, somewhere here, we have something called sphere reflection capture actor and box reflection capture actor. Sphere one is standard. This is going to be kind of hard to see and preview. I can try with lighting on. If that shows up, kind of dark. You can see the reflection of the window on the floor. So the reflection system in Real is based on multiple things. You have part real-time reflection. The reflection I'm seeing there, that's real-time reflection. That's why it shows up. That's also why it's disappearing when I get near. So Unreal falls back partially on real-time reflection, partially on baked reflections. So pre-captured reflections on predefined locations. Basically, you say, at this point, please capture a cube map. And then all the models near that location will take that cube map. If an object is between two of these cube map locations, it will take a blend between both points. So it blends them together. And that's fairly, you don't really notice that. So that's it's kind of a hack. I think Half-Life did this the first time in 2000. Half-Life 2, when was Half-Life 2? 2004, 2005, they started that system as far as I know. Anyway, so you place the location where you want to capture that cube map. You see that thing has a range. So I'm going to say the range should probably be a little bit smaller. It's a bit big for an apartment this small. And you tend to place this near objects that are very bright or very reflective. So things that need it the most, basically. So I'm going to place one near the window. I'll do this without light, so it's easy to see. And I'm going to place one, say, near the back of the room, because we need to have something there, just as a fallback reflection, basically. And then you can always place more of them. You don't want to place too many of them. It does add to performance, but having 4, 5, 6 overlapping is fine. So let's place another one near the TV, which is relatively reflective. Again, this is going to be very hard to see here, but this will improve the reflection later on. We got an advanced one as well. It's called planar reflection. As you can see, when you add it, I'm going to have to change something in the project settings, and I'm going to have to reboot the editor. It's going to take too much time. But for the sake of just showing this, this is high-quality planar reflection. It adds a plane to the world, and that captures accurate reflections everywhere. And you would then be able to sample that from the material editor. It does that automatically. So you tend to place this plane underneath the ground, like just underneath, and it would capture all the reflections and port it over to, for example, the floor. So that we have as well. Good. And then we have the post-processing. So the post-processing I'm going to have to do in 2 steps as well, because most of these things are difficult to see without lighting, right? We haven't done the lighting yet. It's kind of hard to do post-processing then. So I'll add the post-process volume, and then I'll tweak it later on once we've done the light. Here's a post-process volume. Anything within this volume will have different post-processing settings applied. There is a setting, however, that says unbound. If I tick unbound, it just covers the whole level, disregarding the size. So this simply affects the entire level now because this is true. So I've set that to true. Just place it somewhere for a second. And we have a lot of post-process settings, like a lot. I mean, I can go on for a while about all this stuff. Unlike certain other engines, you don't have to enable all these things, or it doesn't take a lot of performance. All of this is enabled by default. All of the POS process is running. Even though these settings are not enabled, you can see they're all disabled. It's actually all already running. You only enable a setting when you want to override the default. Okay, so all of this stuff is running. All of the bloom is running. All of the color correction stuff is running. Lens flare stuff might be running. Motion blur might be running. Everything is there. And that helps, because if you need performance later on, you can just turn things off you don't need, and you will gain performance. Instead of the other approach of not having anything enabled, having a lot of performance in the beginning, then turning the stuff on, and then finding out like, oh shit, we suddenly lost like 90% of our performance because we turned too much on. We rather take it the other way around. We have a much more stable base rate for frame rate. Anyway, I need to do one important thing here for a second first. I need to say that the auto exposure of the lighting is minimum and maximum, I think it was 1, and exposure bias is, say, 3.6. And I mean, it did not type. Yeah, it switched to a Swedish keyboard. And then it has a comma. Still has a comma? Oh my God. They should ban European keyboards. I'm sorry. Okay, so the exposure bias just brightens up the room. So now we have this. You can see the bloom is already running. In fact, I can go to bloom, for example. I can say it should bloom more. For some reason, it should bloom a lot. So the bloom, again, as mentioned, everything is already running. And I can say, for example, you need maybe a dirt mask. And a dirt mask is a simple texture you can import. So I can do, for example, import here. Let's take the dust overlay. It's a PSD file, so you can import that as well. Take that in. Assign it here. I can say dirt mask intensity is, let's say, 5 or so. And it adds this kind of lens dirt on top that only shows up where the bloom occurs. So the bloom has a texture blended on top. So you get more of that. I think that's pretty okay. So I'll leave it at that for the time being. Let's do lighting. Now it gets fun. Now it gets really entertaining to watch. So we have a couple of different types of light. I'm actually going to be able to talk about most of our lights within a 10-minute window. So I'm going to add a spotlight first, right? So the most common ones are spotlight and point light. Obviously, I don't need any point lights for this level, but a spotlight is fine. So I'll add some spotlights here underneath these 3 lamps in the ceiling. If I remember correctly, the settings should be fairly default. I'm going to rotate it slightly towards the wall so you can see this a little bit better. And I'll say, what is it? Let's see. The attenuation radius is 1,500. Let's have this 3 times. We do this, this. Now, this is too simple because you only, the light looks too simple. So we have something called IES textures. I can add that. And now I get more richness in it. You can generate these with free tools. I think Philips possibly made it, or they have at least a tool for it. This is the actual way that that information is stored, even outside game usage. You can download those tools and create those IES textures, which causes, it's hard to see on the ground here for a second, but you get more richness in the lights. So we have that enabled. And then I'm going to add a sunlight. So here's a directional light. This affects the entire level, so it doesn't matter where you place it. I usually place it in some kind of central location. It has an arrow, so I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to make sure the light kind of falls inside, something like that. You can say it says preview all the time. That will obviously go away later. Settings are pretty good. I'm going to leave the settings as is. Also, I don't have the time to really explain this, but you have a lot of settings in here. You can do light shafts, light occlusion, etc. Slightly-ish yellow. So I'll do that. And it's too dark then. Like, it's hard to see with all the bloom, but the ceiling is pitch black, for example. So I'm going to add a skylight. A skylight captures the entire sky and projects that onto the level. So it affects the entire level as well, placing it near the sky here. I'm going to say the bottom, the lower hemisphere color should not be black, but should be slightly gray, because we're in an apartment, so there's light coming from below as well, reflected by the city down below. And that does this. I'm going to set it to static. That means it will be entirely baked. Again, there's a lot of information to take in at this point, but I'm speeding up a little bit. And then we have this, and it's terrible, right? It's ugly. There's one more thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to bake the light. And that is, I'm going to add a light mass portal volume, or light mass portal actually, not the volume. This concentrates the lighting from outside to pass through the window, because it's kind of difficult for the engine to figure out exactly where the windows are and where to focus the calculations. So what we do is we manually tell the engine, okay, so here's the window, please try harder at this location to let light bounce into the room. That was the wrong one. Doesn't have to be super accurate, it just has to roughly match the position of the window. And then, one very last thing. In world settings, it has the general light mesh, the baking settings basically. That's going to be num indirect light bounces 7, and then hold on, I forgot the other numbers. 7, 0, 0, 5. So 0, sorry, the environment intensity is 0, because we don't need that. Ambient occlusion is enabled. Occlusion fraction is 0.5, I thought. Let's verify. 0.5, occlusion exponent 0.65, and then 60. 0.65 and then 60. Good. You want to bake? And as it bakes, I can take a few questions probably to be efficient with time here. Save that, and let's do this. So you can do build lighting only. It's running on preview, but it'll be good enough. So build lighting only. I think I did everything. I hope so. We'll find out. As it does that, by the way, you can see it opens up this one. This is our Swarm agent. You can have distributed rendering, so you can hook up all the computers you have in this one. It will distribute the rendering between them. And here you can follow the progress. Are there any questions during this 1 minute?
You were talking about the lighting engine. What is exactly the reason why it's much stronger than the one from Unity?
Or entire light system, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we just build it well. We've been doing light baking since 1997. So there's a bit of a history there in how to handle baking lights and how to handle doing real-time lights as well, for that matter. There's always been a strong point. In fact, Unreal got built, the original Unreal game got built because we were the first game ever to have colored lighting that worked realistically. So before Unreal in 1997, when you blended lights together, they wouldn't give the correct light, right? When you blend values, they wouldn't give the correct nude color. So we have a very long history in doing lighting very well. So you can see how this is actually done building. In fact, importing the light results back to the level will take longer than the building itself. So it has to compile some stuff now, the textures, which will take time. Now we have this. It's a bit too bright, but I guess for the projector that works. So you can see you have bounce lighting. It's fairly good. I mean, you have some issues here because I did preview quality, but in general, this kind of works, I think. You got reflections. I can get the reflections sharper. It's just for the sake of time. So that went pretty fast, and it doesn't take much effort. Okay. And I'm doing this while talking. I mean, if you do this properly while focusing on it in a job, you can get a lot further than what I just did. So this is how fast it goes. I can then get this to run on mobile. I can port this to a mobile device, and it'll run 60 FPS with the same materials, the same reflections, the same lighting. So.
All right.
I can probably take a few more questions.
Oh, for sure, definitely. Just before I hit the questions on the floor, how many architects actually use Unreal as opposed to game developers?
We don't have exact numbers, because the thing is with architecture that we take, so the deal with Unreal is it's free. You can just get it for free. If you release a game with it, it's 5% royalties on it, and that's it.
Okay.
But if you're an architect or you do something that's not a game,
yeah,
it's free.
Right.
So since it's free, it's very difficult for us to track how many we have,
yeah,
but we have considerable uptake in the architectural scene, right, with all of this stuff, yes.
Okay, very cool. Wow. Mm-hmm. Are there questions from the room?
Hi, can we see the plane fly through the room, like you promised?
Oh, right, sorry, yeah, time and all that stuff. Let's just do this.
Good question.
Or so I didn't set the level here. Yeah, and you can shoot, which is very important, I think. And I have some sound if I can manage to use my, hold on, see if we can get. Yeah, there's no collision on the player to make testing easy, I think. Yeah, it's very, very nice. And you can do this in VR. It's actually really nice when you do this in VR because you feel like a kid holding a plane in front of you, like you did when you were a kid. So it's quite fun. Normally I have a disco ball, but I ran out of time, so I would have made a disco ball within 5 minutes. Do I have 5 minutes?
Oh, of course, go for it.
Okay, do you want disco ball? Yeah, okay, disco ball. I need sphere. Actually, I prepared the disco ball somewhere. I just forgot where it is. Let's see, disco, not there. So I made this thing. It's a sphere, and it has a normal map on it that just scrolls. It's very low resolution as well. It's basically just this, right? Normal map moves, so it looks disco ballish. It's very simple, but it'll do. So I'll take this thing in. I already prepared this. I'll do this without light. This holder thing at the ceiling. It's a very fun thing. The holder is actually a lamp. It's actually 2 lamps creating the holder. So, good. Now, when I add objects to it, I'm gonna have to build the lighting again. I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna set this to movable. So it's a fully dynamic mesh, not being baked into the light system. So I don't have to rebake. And in fact, I'm gonna say shadow casting should be off, just for the sake of doing this easier. No shadow casting. Let's somewhat try to place this correct, which is roughly there without spending too much time. Cool. Then it should have lights. So I'm going to add another spotlight to it. I have the icons hidden. Spotlight to it. This one has a cross over it. Advanced reason, but it basically comes from this stuff, as you can see. So I'm going to set it to movable. Cast shadow is off, so it's more efficient to render. Use inverse squared fall off, so it has an unrealistic fall off range, but it does give me more control. Brightness is now, let's say, 20 or 10 or something. Range or outer cone angle is, let's say, 85, so it's very wide. Attenuation radius is, I don't know, 1,800 or so. We just got a spotlight. I got one here, say. And then we need to have the light from the disco ball showing up in that. So I'm going to make a new material. New material again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend the material with the light. I need a texture for that. Texture is called, I think, disco ball, I hope. That one. So I made this rough approximation of what the light would do. It's not super accurate, probably, but it will work. So I'm going to project this texture within the light itself. In fact, it's going to have to rotate. So, because the disco ball itself rotates, so I'm adding a rotator behind it, and then we'll just connect this to emissive color. And what I have is that, so it's very simple. Then I'm going to set the entire material to not be a surface, but it's a light function. So now I have that. Super simple material, everything here is grayed out. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go back to my light here, and I'm going to say here, well, the light function is the one I just made. And what we have then is this. You can see it's projecting the texture on top. So since I then have that, this is actually a little bit too bloomy and bright to see it properly, so I might have to tweak the settings a bit. We basically want this to appear on the walls. Not sure if you can see it. It's very subtle. Too subtle, I guess. It's showing up on the more brightness when doubting. So you have that, and we're going to duplicate this upwards again as well. Now this one rotates in the wrong direction. I can fix that, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it be, because they're actually rotating, different directions here, but still.
How much time would it take to blow this all up?
To blow it up?
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess I can add an explosion if you want. You want an explosion?
Yes.
Okay, then. Like that. And then I guess I can scale that, if you want. That's a bit big, I guess. Scaling it like this is not really the right way to go. You kind of have to scale it in here, but this will take too much time. So yeah, now I have an explosion. It only happens once, though. If you give me 1 or 2 more minutes, then I can make it explode all the time. Do I have minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I can do a little bit of blueprints. And I can say, actually, I need a tick. On event tick, so for every frame that runs, it's a little bit dirty. Have a delay, so that actually makes it loop. It's a very simple way of doing a loop. So kind of, as mentioned, is dirty, but it'll do something. Every 2 seconds, I want you to take the explosion I have and activate it, which I mistyped, I think. I would select it. Activate particle system component. I guess that should do. I don't know. Does it? Does it? Yeah, but it's too. It doesn't work well if you scale it up, so. But every 2 seconds you have an explosion, but it's too simple, so
Nice,
yeah.
nice.
It's kind of hard to do this within 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Hey, since you've mentioned Unity a couple of times, we might as well mention them again. When Unity came, it became known originally a bit as the small 3D engine for smaller games. And I would hear the critique that Unreal was just too big as a tool to use for smaller indie games and stuff. How would you approach that question now?
The thing with Unity is that it has, I guess, fewer tools embedded by default. It relies more on a plugin system, which has its own pros and cons, so it's a different discussion. But because it has fewer tools embedded, it's easier to get into it, I guess, because there's less to learn, less to experiment with. Whereas with us, it's very intimidating in the beginning, usually, because there's all that stuff to learn and all the features and all the things to do. But then we usually find out that once you've gone through that, it's a lot easier, right? Once you go through the initial hurdle with us, it's easy going. There's not much unexpected stuff happening.
Okay.
Whereas, and with Unity, it tends to sometimes be the other way around. And I mean, both have pros and cons. It's different things, different approaches.
Right.
So
that
but
would...
just to add to that very quickly, and again, I don't have much time for this, but this is my own game. You can look this up online. We released this, as mentioned, 3 months ago. Just very quickly change the time of day. And I built this with a minimum budget, with a very small team. It's an 18-hour game. It's high-end 3D, relatively for team size. And, it's an entire world. This is just one out of the 10, 12 levels or so. And we built this with basically just a few people.
Right.
I would never, ever have been able to do this without Unreal. I'm not saying this because I'm paid to say this. I'm really serious. I would not have been able to do this without Unreal.
Right.
We have a table in the show floor. And we have 2 indies there, Kyoken from Delivers the Moon, and we got Turtleneck with Ride of Ilk. And those are also small teams doing 3D games. So you can have a chat with them as well.
And that was on the pipeline side, but on the performance side, for the player, the consumer, does that make any difference? I mean, is Unreal ever too heavy for people's average PC?
Yes and no, depends how you look at it.
Yes and no.
Unity tends to be better on if you make a simple game,
Yeah.
Unity will run better, and we will run worse.
Right.
That's it.
But there's a point...
But if you do this,
Yeah.
this will work better than Unity. Sorry, Unity.
Yeah.
They're probably in the room already somewhere. But
Lurking
I
in
mean,
the
that's our
shadows.
findings. You can compare yourself as well. I mean, you can just get both engines, just try things out, see what happens. But that's
Right.
usually what happens. So it depends on what you make
Yeah.
and where it makes sense. I'm not going to say that Unreal is the best for every game. It's not.
Right.
Neither is Unity, neither is CryEngine or anything else.
But you mentioned that it runs 60 FPS on mobile devices nowadays.
The thing I built,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. So if you make the right decisions and you keep it small, then you
Yeah.
can still make a very efficient small game on
Yes.
Unreal. Excellent.
But I didn't build a 2D game.
No, that's true.
I mean,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
Again, I'm really not saying Unreal is the best for everything, but we have our strengths as everyone else has.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah. And like you said, the lighting and stuff like that is a historical foundation of the engine. Is a big depth. There's a lot of depth to your games. Are there any...
And even just to highlight this, the performance here, I'm in the editor running this from above the
Right.
level, seeing everything, having a second editor running in the background. And this is
Okay.
all fully dynamic lighting. That's your
Excellent.
performance.
Well, that proves a lot there. Anybody else have one more question, and then we need to move to the next presentation?
Hello. Well, I have no experience with Unreal Engine at all, but this looks very promising and interesting to try. But I had one question which popped up when you were working on creating the material, because you were working with all these blueprints and putting it all together. I was wondering, is it possible to sort of open up a public variable that you can edit in code to make the material do things, basically?
You want to modify the material through something you do in code,
Yes.
basically. Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't have time to show this, but yeah, and even just in my own game here, there's a lot of things happening. Let's see if I can find a plant very quickly. Plant. See, for example, this plant, when it gets night, the plant will close because it reads a value from code. See, now it's closed, and during day it opens. And I mean, it's very, very simple to do. It doesn't take any effort. I can do it within a minute or two or so. If you want, you can come by later and I'll just do it.
Yeah, sure, of course.
So all of that is built in. As mentioned, we have we've been doing this for so long and for such a big teams, we need those kind of things in there. So.
Hey, and Sjoerd, as a lot of these here are students and people getting into the industry, do you have any special offers for students or schools, or is the way you do it with the free tool is accessible for everybody?
Everything's free.
Yeah, so that's it.
I mean,
All
you
right.
release a game with it, it's 5% royalties, only on games. You use it for serious games or something you don't sell to the end consumer being just people, it's free. You use it for simulations or something, it's free. You use it for architecture, it's free. You use it for education, it's free.
Wow.
You only pay 5%, which we feel is very fair for everything you get here. If you release a game, then we want 5%. And we also feel that's good because then we're part of your process. We need you to succeed or we don't make any money. That's an important thing there for us.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sjoerd. Great. Warm applause.